This is the DigiSpooler 2 optical fiber and fine filament winding system. The DigiSpooler 2 is different than the original DigiSpooler in that it has a larger touchscreen interface. It's a 15-inch screen, or I'm sorry, a 17-inch screen versus a 6-inch touchscreen. And this also includes a full tower PC, which is there for the sake of the interface, but is also available for user applications such as Excel or other programs. And it's also standard as a floor standing system with leveling feet. So this particular machine is a bidirectional system, meaning it can wind either from left to right or right to left with full reversing capabilities. And I'm going to go through and make a video manual for the machine right now, starting with the power up procedure. So there's 3 power buttons on the machine. One is for the system itself, right here. You need to turn on the PC itself. And then there's a power button on the back of the monitor. Right there. You get it? Nope. So just like any computer system, we have to wait for it to boot up. I'm going to pause and come back once it is all powered up. Okay, so we're ready to go. And here you can see the main interface screen. But I'll go through and describe the parts of the machine. So again, it's a bidirectional system, so we have a spool shaft here on the right side as well as the left side, and either one can serve as the payoff or take up. Each of those is driven by a brushless servo motor right there, and it is also carried by a servo driven traversing system. And in the case of the payoff side, that traverse serves to keep the fiber payoff point centered on the machine so that there's no angles, fleet angles created between the fiber and any of the pulleys. That puts less stress and strain on the material. And then the traverse on the take-up side is used to follow the recipe. It'll move according to the pitch or space setting in the recipe for the placement of the fiber on the spool. So in between, going from right to left, we have what we call an alignment array, and that will be used on the payoff side to detect the position of the fiber and send a signal back to the system to move the traverse in or out in order to keep the fiber centered. We also have a guide pulley that when you are using this side as the payoff, you actually put down. It's up right now. I'm going to put it down. It's just a thumb screw on there. And then moving on, the fiber will come through the alignment array, around the guide pulley, down to the tension sensor. In this case, I believe we have a 0 to 200 gram range of tension control. Up through our length tracker, which is an encoder-based system that gives you 0.06% length tracking accuracy. Up over our dampening sheave, which is there to absorb any changes in tension, usually due to plucking or poor winds on the payoff spool, and also for when quick accelerations or decels occur on the machine, there can be a slight change in tension, and this will absorb those changes. It's the same function as a dancer arm on a dancer type machine. On this system, we also have our clamps option, so the fiber will come down through past our clamps when we need them. They're just lowered manually by hand, and up around the top guide pulley through another alignment array, but in the case where this side is being used as a take-up, this array is ignored by the system. If this were the payoff side, it would then become the alignment array, and it would be used for centering the fiber. So then it comes onto our take-up shaft. Okay. So I'm going to load a couple spools onto here, and we'll get into the operation. Okay, I've loaded 2 spools onto the machine, a large standard Corning size fiber spool on the right side, and a small 4-inch spool on the left side. And for most of this video, we'll be winding from right to left. The spools, by the way, are held on by these Easy Lock adapter systems, which this is a cone-shaped adapter which will adapt to a wide range of bore sizes. That cone will engage the bore of the spool. These are 10mm shafts, and the adapters will fit any spool with a bore size from 11 to, I think, 48 millimeters in diameter. So they actually twist on to tighten. Same with the other side. Okay, so to thread the, actually take that back. The first thing you want to do once you start the system is either enter a recipe for what you're going to wind, or if one already exists, call it up in the system and home the system based on the recipe parameters. So in this case, we do have a recipe set up, and I'll pull that up right through here. We have a load recipe button up here, and we've got a few already stored in the system. In this case, it's the second one down, where we have a Corning standard on the right and a 4-inch on the left. Press select, and that is now in the system. And if you want to look at the parameters for that recipe, just press recipe setting. And here, right now you can see a lot of the settings are grayed out, and that's because of the recipe is locked, and there's a password that can be set up to unlock that for administrative purposes. Right now, we actually have no recipe no password in there. You just bring up the password keyboard, press enter, and it will unlock things. So here in this case, we have a speed of 60 feet per minute, target tension of 30 grams, and if I wanted to change that, just press on it, brings up a keypad. Maybe I'll change that to 40 grams. Currently a target length of 500 feet, and that can be changed also on the main screen by the operator without needing a password. The pitch or spacing is 106.01 inches, basically. The material diameter is 89 thousandths, or 8.9 thousandths, sorry. And the wind direction is right to left, and I can toggle that just by pressing that, either left to right or right to left. The initial flange is the side of the spool that you want to start winding onto. So we can either start from the front side or the back side. In this case, we do want to be the front. And we also need to enter the dimensions of the spool. So we have left spool dimensions, and that's what applies in this case, and right spool dimensions. And keep in mind, very critical number here is the second line in each one, the diameter. And the diameter is used by the system to establish the initial tension control. And if that number is not accurate, say to within about 1/10 of an inch, you may have some tension control issues, either too tight or too loose, depending on which direction your error is in. So we advise measuring the diameter of the spool, and this includes any material that's on the spool. So we would take a cloth measuring tape, wrap it around the spool's barrel, or look over here, we actually have some material on the spool. We'll wrap a tape measure around there to get the circumference, and then divide that number by pi to get an accurate measurement of the diameter. Okay, so we've already entered that into this system here, into the machine. So the diameter of that right spool is 6.299 inches. All right. So you can save these numbers. We already have them saved, so it's prompting me, do I want to overwrite this? I'll say yes. We could also save it as a different name if we want. Say new name, brings up a keypad, and you enter what you want, it's any alphanumeric name, and you can store it. I'm going to cancel that though. All right, and this list can be very long. You can have 1,000 recipes in there if need be. All right, so I'm going to close that for now and exit out here. So that's our recipe. I'll go through the buttons here on the main screen. You can see here we have a column of settings for each spool, left side and the right side, and they're identical. This top section, you may not see it in the video, but there's a light gray box around this position window and these jog buttons, and that corresponds to the rotational position of that spool. So we're always tracking that position, and you also at times will have the ability to jog that spool or that motor if you need to rotate it into a desired position. Okay. And then for the left side, the spool again is carried on a traversing system, and here again we're tracking the position of the traverse. Sometimes you may want to jog that traverse in or out, or another type of jog, which we call a bump, is available. And the bump is just a set incremental move that you can put into the setup of the machine, where each time you press that, the spool will move the desired amount. And say for instance, you want very fine adjustment. It could be a 1/10,000th of an inch. And each time you press that, it'll move that far, or something bigger. It could be a 1/4 of an inch if you want. And then the back flange or front flange is just telling the system to move that spool so that its front or back flange aligns with the guide pulley that's aligned with it. Okay. So you have the same thing on the right side. We also have a home axis button right there, which right now is red. And the very first thing we want to do when we power up the machine is home each side. And so since those are red, we don't want any red buttons on the machine, so we'll press those. And each one, it's very slow, but each traverse is moving right now. And it's homing. It's going to move back till it hits the limit switch, and then home to the home position based on the recipe setting that's in there right now. So it's flashing yellow until it gets there. It takes a few moments to do it. I'm going to pause for the moment. Okay, so each side of the machine is finished homing, and we can see that those home buttons have turned green. Below each of those is they're basically adjustment buttons for the home position. We're calling them reference, but each time you press them, left or right, which really corresponds to forward or back, it will change that home position by 4/1000ths of an inch. Okay. But really, to get started here, we know according to our recipe that we want to start winding from the front flange of this take-up spool. So I'm going to press the front flange button. It will cause that spool to move forward so that the front flange here lines up with our guide pulley, which should be in the up position right now, by the way, since we're winding onto this side. Okay, and I also want to move the payoff spool up, and in this case I can use either the jog buttons, or if I want to quickly just get it near the starting position, I can press front flange for that one, and that one will move forward. And now I'm ready to thread the fiber through the machine. So I'm going to pause again and thread it according to the path that I described before. Okay, so I've threaded the fiber through the machine. It's probably not visible right now, but just to review, the path is from our supply through the alignment array, over the top pulley, down to our tension transducer, up through our length tracker, which by the way is a spring-loaded system. There's a light spring pressure between the two blue rollers, and that pressure can be adjusted using this knob here. But then it comes up through the rollers, around our dampener, down through our clamps, and up over the next pulley, through the alignment array, but that's being ignored right now by the controller, up over our final guide pulley onto the take-up spool. And I'm just holding the fiber onto the spool with some tape. Right. And something that we suggest doing is preloading the system a little bit with a little bit of tension. So in other words, we want to see that dampener pulled down a little bit by the fiber, and you can actually see the result of that indicated by the tension readout on the screen. You can see that number changing. So, our goal right now is to be at about 40 grams. If we can get close to it ahead of time, it just helps the system. It isn't required, but it's you'll get winding faster if you're something close to that. And by the way, the way that I did that was by loosening my hub a little bit on the spool, and it allows me to turn the spool enough to cause a change in the system. Okay. Just make sure your hubs are tight before you get started. Okay, so looking at the rest of the screen here, we have our main operations section here on the screen, and we already looked at the load recipe button. Next to that is the load stops button, and if I press that, the idea here now is if you have a spool that you have known stops on, in which you may want to perform some operations such as cutting, an inspection, a marking, whatever it might be, you can preload a number of stops between the start and the finish, and you do that by pressing number of stops. Oh, I'm sorry, I have to unlock this function first. Press number of stops, and here it's called number of layers, but say in this case we want to put 5 stops in. Press that, and you'll see an array show up on the screen, in which case you literally enter the stop positions one by one. Okay, and you'll notice that we add a last line there with a 0 in it, which is required by the machine just to know that it is the last stop and not to go any further. Now these stops can be preloaded with a file right into a directory indicated up there in that window, and then saved. And I do have some stops already saved here. I'll bring them up.